My daughter moved in, ostensibly to care for me after my fall, but instead systematically stole my antique books and family jewelry, replacing them with fakes. I, an elderly woman, discovered her cunning betrayal, meticulously gathered evidence, and with legal help confronted her, reclaiming my legacy and dignity. Have you ever experienced a story that resonated deeply? Share your thoughts in the comments below and consider subscribing for more powerful narratives. The autumn light filtered through the tall windows of my study, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a familiar, comforting sight in a room filled with the quiet companionship of stories. At 85, I, Eleanor Albright, had always found my greatest joy within these walls, surrounded by books that were more than mere objects. They were friends, confidants, and repositories of a life well lived. Each volume held a memory, a sentiment, a piece of my soul. My late husband, Arthur, a man of quiet humor and profound wisdom, had often teased me about my literary fortress, as he called my sprawling collection. He knew how much I cherished every first edition, every signed copy, every rare manuscript, each a silent testament to a life spent in pursuit of knowledge and beauty. Life had been peaceful, a gentle rhythm of reading, gardening, and the occasional visit from beloved friends. My days were marked by the turning of pages, the scent of old paper, and the subtle shift of sunlight across my Persian rugs. The silence of the house after Arthur's passing 2 years prior was not lonely, but rather a comforting space for reflection and remembrance. Then came the fall. It was a simple misstep on the worn flagstones of my rose garden path, a sudden lurch, a dizzying blur of green and stone, and then the sharp, agonizing pain. The fracture in my hip was a stark, brutal reminder of my increasing fragility, a physical manifestation of the relentless passage of time. The doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, was gentle but firm. "Eleanor, you can't possibly live alone anymore. The risk of another fall is too high, and with your memory, it's simply not safe." The words hung in the air, a pronouncement that shattered the peaceful illusion of my independent existence. My daughter, Clara, was there almost immediately. She arrived like a whirlwind, her usually perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew, her expensive silk blouse a bit wrinkled from what I imagined was a hurried drive from the city. Her face was etched with a concern that, at the time, I believed to be entirely genuine. Clara, my only child, had always been a complicated blend of ambition and charm, with a certain restless energy that I never quite understood. She lived a comfortable, perhaps even luxurious, life in the bustling metropolis, a life distinctly different from my quiet, contemplative existence in our old, rambling house in the suburbs. "Mother, you can't possibly manage by yourself now," she declared, her voice firm yet seemingly laced with deep affection. She knelt beside my armchair, taking my hand in hers, her touch cool and efficient. "I'm moving in. Just until you're back on your feet. We'll figure things out together." Her offer, made with such apparent selflessness, touched me deeply. A surge of relief, a fragile sense of security, washed over me. I believed, truly believed, that she was doing this out of love, out of duty, out of a genuine desire to care for her ailing mother. So, with a grateful heart, I watched as she brought her sleek, modern furniture and designer clothes into my meticulously organized home, their stark lines a jarring contrast to my worn antiques and classical elegance. She chose the master bedroom, which, after Arthur's passing, I had moved out of, preferring the smaller, cozier guest room closer to the kitchen, a room that felt less empty without him. "It's closer to you, Mother, for easy access," she'd said, a seemingly thoughtful gesture that, in hindsight, held a different, more practical motive for her. She brought a different kind of vibrancy to the house, or so it seemed at first. She cooked simple, healthy meals, though always a bit too bland for my taste, helped me with my morning routine, guiding my hands as I struggled with buttons, and even read to me from some of my less strenuous novels when my eyes grew tired. We'd have tea in the afternoons in the sunroom, and she'd chat about her busy day, about the city, about mundane things that made me feel connected to the world outside my four walls, a world I was slowly losing touch with. "You just rest, Mother," she'd say, "I'll handle everything." However, as the weeks unfolded, a subtle shift began to occur. The initial warmth of her presence slowly began to cool, replaced by an underlying tension, a subtle impatience that she struggled and failed to conceal. It started innocuously enough. My collection of rare first editions, meticulously catalogued and arranged on the top shelf of my study, seemed different, not overtly missing, just reordered. A first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, a cherished gift from Arthur, a signed copy we'd bought together at a small, independent bookstore during a trip to Alabama, was no longer in its usual prominent place. I attributed it to my own aging memory, a momentary lapse, perhaps Clara just tidying up with a bit too much zeal. "Did you move anything in my study, dear?" I'd ask, my voice light, attempting to keep the nascent thread of anxiety from showing. She'd smile, a quick, almost imperceptible flick of her lips, then quickly dismiss it. "Oh, Mother, probably just tidying up for you. You know how I like things neat." Her answers were always plausible, always accompanied by that same bright, almost forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then came the jewelry. My mother's pearls, a string of lustrous, creamy spheres that had graced my neck at countless family gatherings, a symbol of generations of Albright women, were kept in a small, velvet-lined mahogany box in my dressing table drawer. One evening, reaching for them for no particular reason other than habit, my fingers met an unsettling emptiness. The box was there, its smooth, polished surface cool beneath my touch, but the pearls were gone. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, seeped into my bones. "Clara, have you seen my pearls?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice even, to sound casual. She looked up from her phone, a slight frown creasing her perfectly shaped brows, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Pearls? Mother, I haven't touched your jewelry. Are you sure you didn't put them somewhere else?" Her tone was laced with just enough exasperation, just enough of that subtle condescension, to make me doubt myself. "Perhaps I did," I murmured, a wave of genuine confusion washing over me. "My memory isn't what it used to be." She nodded sympathetically, her expression softening, but her eyes held a flicker of something unreadable, something that gnawed at me long after she had returned to scrolling through her device. It was unsettling, this feeling that things were subtly shifting beneath my feet, that my world, once so ordered and predictable, was becoming dislodged, piece by an unseen hand. The house, which had always been my sanctuary, now felt imbued with an unsettling tension, a silent accusation hanging in the air. The initial trickle of missing items soon became a steady, unsettling stream, eroding not just my material possessions but also my fragile peace of mind. After the pearls, it was my grandmother's sapphire brooch, a dazzling piece that caught the light with every movement, its intricate silver setting a testament to forgotten craftsmanship. Then, a vintage silver locket containing a tiny, faded photograph of my parents on their wedding day, its delicate chain intricately woven. These weren't things I used daily, but they were deeply personal, deeply cherished, each imbued with the love and memories of those who had come before me. Each disappearance felt like a violation, a quiet stripping away of my past, a silent erasure of my very identity. My memory, frail as it was becoming with the encroaching Alzheimer's, still held pockets of startling clarity, especially concerning my treasures. I knew where everything should be. I had a precise mental map of every shelf, every drawer, every hidden compartment. Yet, when I would voice my concerns to Clara, she would dismiss them with practiced ease, her voice laced with a gentle yet firm patronization that grated on my nerves. "Mother, you're just misplacing things," she'd say, her hand briefly patting my arm, a gesture meant to soothe but which only amplified my gnawing unease. She'd lean in conspiratorially, her breath smelling faintly of mint. "It's perfectly normal at your age, darling. Don't fret over it. We'll find them eventually, I'm sure." Her tone was always so reasonable, so understanding, so perfectly calibrated that I found myself questioning my own sanity. Was I truly losing my mind? Was this just the cruel hand of Alzheimer's playing tricks on me, making me imagine things that weren't there? The self-doubt was a heavy cloak, suffocating my instincts, making me feel like a bewildered child. But the evidence, however subtle, continued to accumulate. I started making mental notes. Then, when I felt brave enough, actual handwritten lists in a small, cheap spiral notebook I kept hidden beneath a stack of old magazines in my bedside table. I'd note the specific edition, the year of publication, the unique characteristic of a particular antique volume, a torn page corner, a coffee stain on the title page, a distinctive binding. Then, a few days later, I'd check the shelf. A rare first edition of The Great Gatsby, with its distinctive blue dust jacket and a faint, almost invisible tea stain on the bottom corner, would be gone. In its place, a mass-market paperback, or perhaps a more common, less valuable edition, its spine too pristine, its pages too white. Clara would often be dusting my study, her movements seemingly purposeful, yet always leaving a lingering sense of unease. "Just helping you keep things tidy, Mother," she'd chirp, always with that same unconvincing cheerfulness, her eyes sliding away from mine. One afternoon, I sat in my armchair pretending to read, my eyes fixed on the worn binding of a Dickens novel, but watching Clara from the corner of my eye. She was in my study, her back to me, her movements deliberate as she rearranged a shelf of my cherished American literature. I heard the faint rustle of pages, the soft thud of a book being set down. I saw her hand reach for a specific book, a small, leather-bound volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, inscribed by Arthur on our 10th wedding anniversary, a tiny, faded ink stain on its front cover. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest. That book was priceless to me, its sentimental value immeasurable. She pulled it from the shelf, glanced at its spine, then with a swift, practiced motion tucked it into a large, expensive-looking tote bag she often carried, one she claimed was for her work documents. She then replaced it with another indistinguishable volume, its binding almost identical, but lacking the precious inscription and the telltale ink stain. My breath hitched in my throat. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know the sharpness of my peripheral vision, or the sudden, blinding clarity that sometimes cut through the encroaching fog of my memory, like a beam of sunlight piercing through thick clouds. When she emerged from the study, her face was serene, almost beatific. "All done, Mother, your study is spotless, you'll be able to find everything now." I forced a smile, a brittle, strained mask of polite gratitude. "Thank you, dear. You're always so helpful." Inside, a cold, hard certainty solidified. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't age. This was deliberate. This was betrayal. The woman I had raised, my own daughter, my flesh and blood, was systematically stealing from me. The realization was a bitter pill, harder to swallow than any physical ailment. It wasn't just the monetary value, it was the profound violation of trust, the desecration of my memories, the quiet undoing of my past. Each item she took was a piece of my history, a fragment of Arthur, a whisper of my lineage, now gone, swallowed by her greed. The weight of this understanding pressed down on me, making it difficult to breathe. The quiet, comfortable home I had cherished now felt tainted, a stage for a slow, agonizing theft, a silent drama of deception. I felt trapped, vulnerable, and profoundly alone. How could I confront her without sounding like a confused old woman, easily dismissed by her practiced lies? How could I fight back against my own flesh and blood, against someone who feigned such care and devotion, yet stripped me bare with such cunning? The questions swirled in my mind, a tormenting carousel of doubt and despair. The initial shock of Clara's betrayal gave way to a cold, unwavering determination. I was an old woman, yes, and my memory might falter, but my mind was far from broken. I was a leaner Albright, and I would not be easily fooled. I had spent a lifetime immersed in stories of strategy and cunning, of heroes and villains, and now I realized I was living my own. The first step was to confirm my suspicions beyond a shadow of a doubt, not for Clara's benefit, but for my own peace of mind. I needed irrefutable proof, something concrete to stand on when the inevitable confrontation came. My initial attempts at confrontation had been met with dismissal, gaslighting, and the infuriating sympathy that Clara so readily offered. "Mother, you're just having a moment," she'd say, her voice dripping with mock concern, her hand briefly patting my shoulder as if I were a child. "Perhaps you should rest, you're overthinking things, it's the Alzheimer's, you know." It was a tactic designed to make me doubt myself, to make me believe I was truly losing my mind, to make me retreat into my own confusion. But after seeing her tuck that Shakespeare volume into her expensive tote bag, I knew better. I had to be smarter, more subtle, more methodical. My study, once my sanctuary, became my laboratory. I devised a system, small, almost imperceptible traps to catch her in the act. I started with my beloved antique globes, not particularly valuable, but too cumbersome to easily move without detection. I marked the underside of one, a rare 18th century celestial globe, with a tiny, almost invisible scratch using a sewing needle, a unique identifier that only I would know. A few days later, I accidentally knocked it slightly, and sure enough, the scratch was gone. A replacement, almost identical in its antiquated appearance but lacking the subtle patina of genuine age, sat in its place. Clara's deftness was unnerving. She wasn't just stealing, she was meticulously covering her tracks, replacing originals with convincing fakes. She was a professional. Next, I focused on the books. Each day, before she arrived to tidy, I would place a minuscule, almost transparent piece of tape on the spine of a specific rare book, just above the shelf line so it would break if removed. I also began taking high-resolution photographs of certain sections of my bookshelves, focusing on the unique arrangements of specific volumes, the slight lean of a particular stack, the way the light caught a particular gilded spine. It was a slow, painstaking process, requiring patience and a steady hand, attributes that Clara, in her arrogance, believed I no longer possessed. My hands, though sometimes shaky with arthritis, still held the precision of a practiced librarian, a lifetime of organizing and cataloging guiding my movements. Each day when she left the study, I would check my traps. Invariably, the tape would be broken, the books subtly rearranged, and new, less valuable additions would appear in place of my cherished originals. The pattern was undeniable. My focus then shifted to the more portable treasures, the jewelry. This required an even more intricate plan. I had a small, antique music box that played a delicate lullaby, a gift from Arthur on our first anniversary, its painted porcelain top depicting a pastoral scene. It was kept in my dressing table drawer, right beside my jewelry box. Inside the music box, I placed a tiny, almost invisible pressure sensor, the size of a grain of rice, connected to a silent alarm that would only trigger a small, disguised red light on a hidden monitor tucked away in a hidden compartment of my bedside table. It was a crude but effective system, something I'd pieced together from an old electronics hobby kit Arthur had left behind, a collection of tiny wires and circuits I had meticulously reassembled. One evening, after Clara had gone out claiming a dinner engagement, I checked the monitor. The red light was faintly blinking, a silent confirmation. My heart sank, but a grim satisfaction settled in. She had opened the music box. The next morning, I feigned a sudden, overwhelming desire for my grandmother's sapphire brooch. "Clara, dear," I said, putting on my most frail, wistful voice, "I'm feeling rather elegant today. Could you fetch my sapphire brooch for me, the one with the tiny diamond accents?" She went to the drawer, her movements unhurried, her back to me. I watched her reflection in the mirror, her hand reaching for the jewelry box. There was a slight hesitation, a barely perceptible tremor. "Oh, Mother," she said, her voice a little too strained, "it doesn't seem to be here. Are you sure you didn't wear it out, perhaps to the club last week?" Her eyes darted away, a telltale sign of evasion. "Perhaps not," I murmured, my voice betraying no emotion, my poker face surprisingly effective. "My memory, you know." The red light on my monitor confirmed it. She had touched the music box. The brooch was gone. And in its place, a remarkably good, yet ultimately fake replica gleamed faintly in the drawer. The evidence was mounting, piece by agonizing piece. It wasn't just my imagination. Clara was a thief, systematically stripping me of my inheritance. The realization was a devastating blow, yet it also fueled a fierce resolve within me. I was not a frail, confused old woman, waiting to be fleeced. I was a leaner, and I would fight back. I knew I couldn't confront her directly yet. I needed more undeniable proof. Proof that would stand up, even against her calculated denials and my own perceived frailty. The game was on, and I, the quiet librarian, was ready to play. Every stolen item, every feigned innocence from Clara only sharpened my resolve. This wasn't just about the items. It was about reclaiming my peace, my dignity, and the legacy that was rightfully mine. The weight of Clara's betrayal pressed down on me, a constant, dull ache that surpassed any physical discomfort. Each morning, as I awoke, the first thought that entered my mind wasn't about the day ahead, but about what new treasure might have vanished overnight. The hidden notebook under my mattress grew thicker, filled with meticulous dates, descriptions, and the chilling confirmation of missing items. My hand, though sometimes shaky with age, scribbled out entries with a precision born of desperation. The faint, barely visible tape on book spines, the subtle markings on the underside of trinkets, the tiny sensor in the music box, each was a testament to my growing certainty. Clara's subtle acts of theft, disguised as tidying or misplacement, no longer fooled me. I observed her with a newfound sharpness, noting the fleeting glance she'd cast at my jewelry box when she thought I wasn't looking, the almost imperceptible rustle of paper from my study after she'd spent time organizing. She moved with a practiced ease, a silent predator in my own home. Her smiles, once seemingly warm, now felt like thinly veiled masks, designed to lull me into a false sense of security. "Mother, you seem a little distracted today," she'd say, her voice oozing mock concern, when in reality I was deeply engrossed in my silent investigation. "Is everything all right?" I'd simply nod, offering a vague response, refusing to give her any hint that I was onto her. One afternoon, I pretended to be asleep in my armchair, a classic detective novel resting open on my lap. Clara, believing me to be fully succumbed to my afternoon nap, entered my study. I heard the faint click of the hidden compartment in my bedside table opening, the one containing my small, disguised monitor connected to the music box sensor. From my position, I could see a sliver of the doorway. Her shadow flitted across the threshold. I heard a soft creak as she reached for something, followed by the faint rustle of fabric. Then she emerged, her face expressionless, and closed the study door softly. My heart pounded. I waited until I heard her go into her own bedroom, the soft click of her door signaling my opportunity. Then slowly, carefully, I rose. My legs protested, a dull ache in my hip, but my resolve pushed me forward. I went into my study. There, on the small table where I usually kept my reading glasses, was a small, empty velvet pouch. It was the one I used to keep my delicate gold locket, a cherished gift from my own mother on my 21st birthday, filled with tiny engravings of my family tree. I reached for it, my fingers trembling. The locket was gone. And in its place, a cheap, tarnished replica, almost identical at a glance but lacking the intricate detail and the unmistakable weight of solid gold. My breath hitched. She wasn't just taking, she was replacing. She was systematically erasing my history, leaving behind hollow imitations, mere shadows of what once was. A wave of nausea washed over me, cold and sickening. It was one thing to suspect, another entirely to witness such calculated deceit, to see the tangible proof of her cold-heartedness. This wasn't a desperate act. This was a methodical, cold-hearted operation, meticulously planned and executed. I looked around my study, at the shelves filled with books that were no longer entirely mine, at the empty spaces where irreplaceable treasures once sat. The home that Arthur and I had built, filled with the echoes of our lives and laughter, now felt like a sterile museum, curated by a thief, a shrine to absence. The betrayal was a gaping wound in my heart, bleeding silently. How could my own daughter, the child I had nurtured and loved, the recipient of all my hopes and dreams, do this to me? It was a pain far deeper than any physical ailment, a profound disappointment that shook the very foundations of my belief in family. The fog in my mind, which had always been a source of frustration and fear, now seemed to part, revealing the stark clarity of her true intentions. It wasn't just about my memory failing. It was about Clara's insidious exploitation of my vulnerability, her cynical calculation of my perceived weakness. She saw my Alzheimer's not as a challenge to overcome together, but as an opportunity, a weapon to be wielded against me, a cloak beneath which to hide her nefarious actions. She was preying on my weakness, systematically stripping me of my legacy, piece by agonizing piece under the guise of care. The unmasking was complete. The kind, caring daughter I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger with calculating eyes and thieving hands. The realization solidified my resolve. I would not let her win. I would fight back, not with anger or desperation, but with the same quiet cunning she had used against me. The meeting with Linda Hayes was a clandestine affair, orchestrated with the precision of a spy novel. I feigned a recurring headache, claiming I needed fresh air and a short, unsupervised walk around the block, a plea Clara reluctantly granted, believing my frailty would keep me close to home. Instead, I diverted my path to a prearranged coffee shop a few blocks away, a bustling little place called The Daily Grind, where Linda, unassuming in a plain charcoal coat and reading glasses, was waiting. We sat in a secluded booth at the back, the murmur of conversation and the clatter of cups providing a shield for our hushed discussion. I laid out my case, literally and figuratively. I presented my hidden notebook, now bulging with high-resolution photographic evidence, meticulous dates, and handwritten descriptions of every stolen item, every fake replacement. It was a tangible testament to my ordeal. Linda's expression remained impassive as she flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. She examined the blurry, hastily taken photos of my bookshelves, comparing them to the detailed descriptions of the missing first editions. She noted the unique imperfections I had marked on my antique globes, the invisible scratches, the tiny nicks. I even produced a small, almost microscopic chip from the fake sapphire brooch that I had managed to pry off with a pair of tweezers when I discovered the swap, placing it carefully on the table between us. Eleanor, this is extraordinary, she murmured, her voice laced with awe, her eyes meeting mine with genuine respect. Your attention to detail, despite everything, is truly remarkable. This is incredibly compelling evidence. She asked me about Clara's habits, her financial situation, any friends or associates she might have. I recounted Clara's increasingly extravagant spending habits, the new designer handbags, the frequent salon appointments, the unexplained weekend trips. I spoke of her frequent complaints about money, her casual remarks about needing investments that never seemed to materialize. I spoke of her frequent personal calls, taken in hushed tones behind closed doors, her secretive demeanor, her evasiveness whenever I asked about her work. She always said she was doing it for me, for my financial security in my old age, I explained, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. But it became clear she was only interested in her own. Linda assured me that my documentation was vital, a veritable treasure trove of proof. This isn't just about the monetary value of these items, Eleanor, she explained, her voice calm but firm, her gaze steady. It's about the emotional distress, the profound breach of trust, the calculated exploitation of your vulnerability. This is elder abuse, pure and simple, and it's a serious crime. We can build a very strong case based on this. She outlined a comprehensive plan of action, filing a formal police report with the Elder Abuse Unit, obtaining search warrants for Clara's bank records and potentially her apartment, and initiating a civil suit to recover my assets and compensate for the emotional damages. The key now is to gather all the evidence before she realizes you're onto her, Linda emphasized, leaning forward slightly. The element of surprise is crucial for this kind of case. We want to catch her completely off guard. Returning home, I maintained my facade of compliant frailty, a seemingly confused old woman, but beneath it, a storm was brewing, a fierce resolve hardening my spirit. Clara, oblivious to the legal machinations beginning to swirl around her, continued her routine, her false kindness a constant, galling reminder of her treachery. She would bring me my afternoon tea, perfectly brewed but somehow lacking warmth, read a newspaper article about local gossip, and then, inevitably, drift towards my study or dressing table, her movements seemingly casual but her eyes sharp and assessing, searching for her next target. I noticed a subtle shift in her behavior. She seemed a little more agitated, a little more desperate. Perhaps her investments weren't paying off as she hoped, or perhaps her illicit activities were proving less profitable than she anticipated. This only fueled my resolve, giving me a grim satisfaction. One evening, as I pretended to be engrossed in a particularly dense historical novel, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Clara entered my room, her eyes darting nervously around, her usual poise replaced by a subtle jitteriness. She didn't know it, but I had installed a tiny, almost undetectable motion-activated camera, disguised as a ceramic bird in a potted plant, given to me by Arthur years ago, pointed directly at my jewelry box. It was a gift from Arthur, a whimsical bird-shaped camera he'd used for wildlife photography, now repurposed for a far more serious hunt. "Mother," she began, her voice a little too strained, a little too high-pitched, "I'm just going to tidy your dresser. It's looking a bit cluttered, dear." As she spoke, her hand instinctively went to the velvet box where my antique emerald ring, a family heirloom dating back to my great-grandmother, was supposed to be. I watched her reflection in the mirror, her eyes wide with a fleeting panic as she realized the box was empty. I had, with Linda's guidance, discreetly moved the ring earlier that day, replacing it with a costume jewelry replica, one I'd bought years ago for a themed party. It was a test, a final confirmation. Clara quickly recovered, her features smoothing into a strained smile. "Oh my, it seems to have gone missing again," she said, her voice laced with a familiar, condescending sympathy, though her eyes betrayed a hint of frustration. "Your memory, Mother," she trailed off, leaving the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. I simply nodded, my expression blank, my silence a more potent weapon than any words. But inside, a fierce triumph surged through me. The camera, I knew, had captured her reaction, her fleeting moment of panic at the empty box. This was the final piece of the puzzle, undeniable proof of her guilt and her desperate attempts to cover her tracks. The storm was gathering, its dark clouds looming, and Clara had no idea of the tempest that was about to break. My quiet acts of defiance, born of necessity and fueled by righteous anger, were now building into an unstoppable force, ready to reclaim not just my treasures, but my very sense of self. The day of the reckoning dawned cold and gray, mirroring the chill that had settled deep in my heart. Linda had assured me that all preparations were complete. The police had been briefed, and an officer, Officer Miller, a stern but sympathetic woman, would be accompanying us, though discreetly, to avoid alarming Clara prematurely. My hidden camera footage, compiled onto a small flash drive, combined with my meticulous notebook and the physical evidence of the fake items, was now irrefutable proof. I had invited Clara to my study, feigning a desire to discuss some important family matters, using a tone of quiet urgency I knew she would recognize. She arrived promptly, a saccharine smile plastered on her face, her eyes still holding that wary, calculating glint I had come to despise. She settled into the armchair opposite me, her posture relaxed, seemingly confident that she held all the cards, believing she still had me neatly tucked into her pocket of convenience. "Mother, what is it you wanted to discuss so urgently?" she asked, her voice light, almost airy, but I detected a subtle tension in her jaw, a faint tremor in her carefully manicured hands. "Is everything all right? You sound distressed." "Everything," I replied, my voice calm, steady, betraying nothing of the tempest raging within me, "is about to be very clear, Clara. Crystal clear, in fact." I reached for my desk drawer, pulling out the thick, leather-bound notebook, its pages now filled with the damning evidence of her greed. Her eyes widened imperceptibly, a flicker of something akin to fear passing through them, quickly masked by a forced smile. She recognized it, of course. She'd seen me with it, though she believed it to be merely the ramblings of a confused old woman. "What's that, Mother?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant, her voice a little too high-pitched, but her gaze was fixed, mesmerized by the notebook, a snake watching a charmer. "This, Clara," I began, my voice unwavering, resonating with a newfound authority, "is the truth. It's a meticulously kept record of every single piece of my inheritance you have stolen. Every rare antique book, every precious piece of jewelry, every irreplaceable memory you have desecrated for your own selfish gain." Her face went ashen, as if all the blood had drained from it. The color vanished from her cheeks and her jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. "Mother, what are you talking about? Are you feeling all right? You're confused. You're hallucinating." "I haven't taken anything." Her voice rose, becoming a desperate, frantic shriek, echoing through the quiet study, shattering the carefully constructed peace. "Oh, but you have, Clara," I countered, my voice cutting through her panicked denials like a surgeon's scalpel. "And I have undeniable proof. Detailed notes, precise dates, meticulously organized photographs, and even irrefutable video footage." As I spoke, I calmly activated the small tablet Linda had provided, placing it on the desk between us. The screen illuminated, displaying the crystal-clear recording from the hidden camera in my room. Clara's face, projected onto the screen, visibly recoiled as she watched her own image, captured in stark, undeniable clarity, meticulously replacing my antique emerald ring with a cheap fake, her eyes darting nervously around the room, unaware of the lens capturing her every move. She gasped, a choked, guttural sound, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle the scream. "No, that's not real. That's been doctored. You're imagining things, Mother. You're sick. You're losing your mind." Her voice was a desperate, raw shriek, tearing at the fabric of the room, a desperate attempt to cling to her rapidly unraveling lies. "I am not sick, Clara," I said, my voice cold, devoid of emotion, cutting through her increasingly frantic pleas. "And I am not imagining things. I saw you, I watched you, I documented everything, and now the police will see you too and they will take action." Just then, a quiet, deliberate knock at the front door broke the tense, suffocating silence. It was Officer Miller, whom Linda had arranged to be present, a silent, imposing figure who now stepped into the hallway, her uniform a stark symbol of authority. Clara's eyes darted to the doorway, then back to me, pure, unadulterated terror now etched on her features, a primal fear that transcended her carefully constructed facade. "You called the police," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a ragged gasp. "How could you? I'm your daughter, your own flesh and blood." Her eyes welled with tears, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "Because you left me no choice, Clara," I said, the pain in my voice raw but firm, an ache deep in my soul. "You exploited my age, my illness. You preyed on my vulnerability. You stole from me not just my possessions but my sense of security, my peace of mind, my very dignity. You betrayed every ounce of trust I had in you, every memory we shared, every moment of love I gave you." The words were a torrent, fueled by years of silent suffering. The confrontation was brutal, agonizing, a painful tearing of the last threads that bound us, but it was necessary. Seeing her exposed, her deceit laid bare, was a bitter victory, but a victory nonetheless. The emotional toll was immense, but so was the surge of justice, a powerful current running through my veins. The reckoning had come, swift and undeniable, and the truth, meticulously gathered, was finally laid bare. I had faced my betrayer and I had prevailed. The path to reclaiming my life and my legacy had begun, not with a whimper but with a roar. The aftermath of the reckoning was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, police reports, and the painful, yet ultimately cathartic, process of cataloging my recovered possessions. Clara, facing the irrefutable evidence, my meticulously kept notebook, the damning video footage, the statements from the antique dealers she had used, and the undeniable discrepancies in her own bank accounts, eventually confessed to the thefts. The police investigation uncovered her extensive debts, accrued through reckless spending and questionable investments, and her systematic sale of my treasures through various online auction sites and local antique dealers, often at prices far below their true value, a testament to her desperation. Linda, my unwavering advocate, a pillar of strength and integrity, ensured that every piece of my inheritance that could be traced was recovered. And for those irreplaceable items that couldn't, Clara was held financially accountable, her remaining assets seized to provide restitution. The restitution was a long and arduous process, spanning several months, but slowly, meticulously, my home began to feel like mine again, the shadows of deceit slowly receding. The initial shock of Clara's betrayal eventually gave way to a profound sense of sadness, a grief not for the lost items, but for the shattered remnants of what had once been our mother-daughter bond. She was sentenced to a period of probation and ordered to pay restitution, but the true punishment, I believed, was the utter and irreversible shattering of our relationship. She never truly apologized, never showed genuine remorse, only a bitter resentment for being caught, for having her carefully constructed world of deception crumble around her. I saw her only once after the confrontation, in court, where she looked at me with an expression of cold fury, her eyes accusing, as if I were the one who had wronged her, as if my fight for justice was an act of cruelty. In the quiet moments, surrounded by the comforting silence of my study, I reflected on the strength I had discovered within myself. The Alzheimer's still lingered, a shadowy presence at the edges of my mind, sometimes making a familiar name elusive or a recent memory fleeting, but it no longer defined me. It no longer made me a victim. I had fought and I had won. My story, once one of vulnerability and exploitation, had become a testament to resilience and unwavering resolve. I began to spend my days reclaiming my study, meticulously rearranging my books, replacing the fakes with the recovered originals, my hands lingering on the spines, feeling their familiar texture. The small scratches I had made, once markers of my suspicion, now served as tangible symbols of my victory, silent witnesses to my triumph. Each restored volume, each glittering jewel returned to its rightful place was a small triumph, a reaffirmation of my strength, a mending of the fabric of my life. My friends who had been quietly supportive without truly understanding the depth of my ordeal were now in awe. "Eleanor, you're an inspiration," my dear friend Helen, a retired history professor, said one afternoon, her voice filled with genuine admiration, as she admired a restored painting Clara had tried to sell. "To go through all that and to fight back with such courage, it's simply remarkable." I simply smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. It wasn't courage, not in the heroic sense. It was a desperate, fundamental need to protect what was mine, to honor Arthur's memory, and to reclaim my dignity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. I also found solace in new connections. Linda became more than just my lawyer. She became a trusted confidant, a loyal friend, a testament to the fact that kindness, integrity, and profound compassion still existed in the world, even in the face of such darkness. We continued to meet for coffee, discussing not only my case but the broader issues of elder abuse. Inspired by my experience, I began volunteering at a local elder advocacy group, sharing my story not for sympathy but to empower others. "Don't let them tell you you're too old, too confused, too frail to fight," I would tell the small groups, my voice clear and strong, resonating with conviction. "Your voice still matters, your story still matters. And your legacy is worth fighting for, no matter who tries to take it from you." I spoke not from a place of bitterness or anger, but from a place of deep understanding because I had lived through it, and I had come out the other side stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever. The final scene of my story unfolded not in a courtroom or a somber lawyer's office, but in the sunlit embrace of my meticulously restored garden, surrounded by the vibrant hues of late spring, the scent of blooming roses filling the air. The antique globes in my study gleamed, their surfaces polished, their stories restored. The books stood proudly on their shelves, their spines a colorful testament to a lifetime of learning. And my jewelry, though some pieces were still missing, glittered with renewed brilliance, symbols of memories reclaimed. I had invited Linda, Helen, and a few other close friends for a quiet afternoon tea, a celebration of new beginnings. As I sipped my Earl Grey, warmed by the gentle sunlight, surrounded by the sounds of birdsong and the quiet murmur of gentle laughter, I felt a profound sense of peace, a tranquility that had eluded me for far too long. My journey was not just one of survival but of triumph. I had taken back my life, brick by emotional brick, and rebuilt it with unwavering strength. But more than that, I had built a new legacy, one of speaking truth to power, of showing others that no matter the circumstances, no matter how dire the betrayal, you could always rise. In doing so, I had not only reclaimed my own peace but had become a beacon of hope for others navigating similar shadows. And in that, I had finally found true contentment. My life, once threatened by deceit, now blossomed with renewed purpose. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please make sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments.